Durham, that every 6 hours somebody was dying in a coal mine in the United Kingdom.
Right,
and
so now that's better.
Every 2 hours somebody was being seriously injured. Let's go and get down to the coal face. I'm keeping you down here in the cold. It gets a bit lower again.
Yeah. So you can see where you're going again.
Sorry for taking my time. This is down the mahogany drift mine at Beamish.
Man, that's really low. And not myself out.
You can come in on the left as well if you want to. There's plenty of space, don't worry. I won't give you my pick and shovel. Not yet, yeah? Because that's my wages, that. Do you want to come down into the middle? So let me give you a little bit more information now as well, if I may. You're now at the coal face, and what the men did every 3 months, they drew lots to see where they were going to be working on the coal face. The drift mine here, and it's the geology of this part of the northeast of England, means that there was no coal face any higher than 4'6". So you at the back are at the highest, right. but the lowest was 18 inches. Right. So they drew lots every 3 months. It was called a cavil, and if they drew a bad lot, then it's 3 months, 8 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week, working on your belly, working on your gut, dragging the coal out with a pick and shovel and filling the tubs behind you. Now those tubs, every time you filled a tub of coal, was about 406 kilos, half a ton of coal, you got sixpence in old money, 2.5 pence today. And what does sixpence buy you in 1913? Well, I can tell you it buys you 3 loaves of bread, because bread was about 2pence a loaf. It buys you a couple of kilos of potatoes, a couple of kilos of sugar. So every time you're filling one of those tubs, you're filling up, you're putting half a meal on the table. But you're not working in these conditions, you're working in these. You can just switch that off just for a second, the wages, so they only get 3pence for the tub. Yeah? So this is the conditions they're working in. There's a hand drill, because they were using dynamite as well. They would drill and they would walk back to approximately where you turned in, yeah? Off that no road. They would explode it, and then they wouldn't wait for the dust to settle, they would just go straight back in again. And this man here at the front, you won't see it, but he's touching the coal, and I want you to all touch the coal when you go out. Because 320 to 340 million years ago, you would have been standing now in a tropical rainforest. So that coal you touch, and it's the real coal, it's not been put in by the museum, is fossilized wood from tropical rainforests from 320 to 340 million years ago. And
what does it burn like?
Pardon?
What does it burn like?
It burns really well because it's fossilized wood, it's carbon, so it combusts. And it's really good, this type of coal is good for coal fires, it's good for the engines, so they've got steelworks in Constant in 1913, well right up into the 1970s, early 1980s. You've got the shipyards, so it's fueling the steam-powered ships as well, this type of coal. Any questions you want to ask me?
What were the different grades of coal? There was anthracite. Was that brought out of here? Or was
yeah,
it
no,
steam
there's
coal?
no anthracite taken out of here. I can't remember all the different types of coal. Anthracite was very common down south in the Kent coalfield, and I believe I was in Derbyshire last weekend, and I believe I was talking to somebody down there, and they were coal mining anthracite down in Derbyshire. I can't remember what this is. I'm sorry, I'm not very geologically switched on that. But it's definitely not anthracite.
It's like what they call steam coal. Is that the thing there?
Yeah, basically steam coal. So apologies for that. Any other questions you want to ask us? When do I start work? I mean, when you think of that steam coal, or 53 million tonnes of coal out of 304 coal mines, it's a heck of a lot. The Welsh were the only ones that produced more coal in that particular period of time, but they had more mines as well.
Who owned this mines?
This mine would have been owned by a company called the Joyceys. The further you go towards the coastline, they're owned by the Londonderrys. There's a big statue to one of the Lord Londonderrys in Durham. And without getting too political, in the 1930s, the Londonderrys were very pally, if I can call it that, with Hitler. And they would go on hunting trips, not with Hitler because he was a vegetarian, but they would go on hunting trips with Goering and people like that. It's interesting that the Londonderrys, this is Joycey, and Joycey was a coal miner who became an engineer, who became a coal owner. But it's interesting about the Londonderrys that in 1842, when it stopped girls and boys and women working down the mines, Londonderry appealed against it in the House of Commons, saying that they were model coddling the working classes, and the working classes needed money. This is when he was living in Seaham, in the big lodge in Seaham, that Byron frequented frequently as well.
So nothing's changed, has it really?
Not really. Exactly. Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The French there, the more the things change, the more they stay the same. You've never heard a coal miner use French like that ever before, and that's the last time. I'll let you up if you don't mind. If there's any other question, what on the other side, if is a lad called Kev on the outside, I'll introduce you. He might be able to answer that question for you, sir. Because he's the next coal miner who's a bit more up on the technological side of it.
I wasn't sure, yeah.
So if you go out, I'll follow you out so I don't lose anybody.
Yeah. You okay?
Yeah, fine.
Thinking about winning the lottery. Well, I've won the lottery, really, haven't I?
You have won the lottery.
Being where we're from,
Oh, I know.
what time we came
Imagine.
from.
Oh,
Imagine
well,
if
yeah,
they
exactly,
did that,
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly, because it was just family tradition.
Oh,
There's your cool pig.
Yeah.
That's all it was, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's all it was. It was either this or and for the women's service. Okay, young man?
Right, Chief?
Right.
We'll have to get you out just in case there's a queue out.